We begin with the widespread 911 outage in at least 4 states overnight.
People in Nebraska, Texas, South Dakota, and Nevada were unable to call the emergency number from cell phones or landlines. Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas starts us off. Good morning, Pierre.
George, good morning. Potentially thousands of Americans with added stress overnight as they dialed 911 for help when every second counts. Motor police forces across 4 states reporting that their 911 phone lines were down, including the entire state of South Dakota, a county in Nebraska, a police force in Del Rio, Texas, and 2 departments in Nevada, including Las Vegas. In Vegas, residents were urged to dial 911 on a mobile device so the police would be able to see your number and call you back right away. Service was later restored to Las Vegas and South Dakota, but today there will be an urgent effort to figure out why this happened and whether these outages are somehow connected. It's unclear how widespread the situation was. This comes as new analysis from the Department of Homeland Security warns that fiber optics lines supporting 911 call centers have likely become a target. But a similar outage in February appears to have been a technical glitch. Much more to find out, Michael.
Yeah, a lot more to find out on that, Pierre. Thank you so much.
It's unclear what caused the outages, but it comes as the Department of Homeland Security has told officials to be on the lookout for cyber threats. The government warning in the past that there's an increased risk of cyber attacks to 911 services as they move to internet-based systems. Many Americans relieved, but searching for an explanation as services come back online this morning.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. If you haven't heard, we've had yet another major outage in the United States of America, as now 911 has been reportedly offline, where people are unable to get a hold of 911 because potentially a cyber attack has occurred. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, this has been happening quite often recently. AT&T went down and went offline for a period of time. The government reported that the Department of Homeland Security, their website, the CIA's website, all these government websites were down for a period of time during one of Joe Biden's State of the Union addresses. We've obviously heard of attacks and vulnerability of the power grid. But of course, where have we heard all of this before? And what have we been programmed with? We've heard the World Economic Forum, all these unelected bureaucrats or whatever you want to call them. I call them unelected scumbags who go to these conferences and talk about how we better all be prepared for a cyber attack. Of course, we all should be prepared for a cyber attack. They know this ahead of time because they're the ones who are going to be responsible for it.
Global Security Outlook Report 2023. This is a result of research in collaboration with the forum's communities and our partner Accenture, in which we've interviewed and sought input from over 300 executives globally. The most striking finding that we found is that 93% of cyber leaders and 86% of cyber business leaders believe that the geopolitical instability makes a catastrophic cyber event likely in the next 2 years.
But still pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services. Our society as a whole would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
And of course, we've been programmed into believing and accepting a potential major 911, major grid shutdown, major power outage, major SHTF type of scenario in America from a lot of the predictive programming out there. We've seen Leave the World Behind. We've seen Purge movies. We've seen movies like The Cell, where all of these films are centered around the world not being able to function with the power grid off and a major cyber attack being responsible for it.
Police Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable. Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable. Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable.
We are seeing ongoing cyber attacks across the country.
What just happened here is happening everywhere. We need to get to that bunker Danny told us about, and we need to get there now. You know something? I had a sneaking suspicion, but I wanted more information first. All the signs were there, sure, but I didn't want to scare anyone. Call me crazy because it is crazy. It would have made more sense if we were on the brink of an all-out invasion. I didn't think we'd actually let something like this happen. I thought we were smarter than that. My primary client works in the defense sector. I spent a lot of time cost-benefit analysis of military campaigns. There was one program in particular that terrified my client the most. A simple three-stage maneuver that could topple a country's government from within. The first stage was isolation. Disable their communication and transportation. Make the target as deaf, dumb, and paralyzed as possible. For the second stage, synchronized chaos. Terrorize them with covert attacks and misinformation. Warming their defense capabilities, leaving their weapon systems vulnerable to extremists in their own military. Without a clear enemy or motive, people would start turning on each other. The third stage would happen on its own. What's the third stage? A coup d'etat. Civil war. Collapse. This program was considered the most cost-effective way to destabilize a country. Because if the target nation was dysfunctional enough, it would, in essence, do the work for you. Whoever started this wants us to finish it.
Wait now. All the roads are blocked. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do right now. I can barely do anything without my cell phone and my GPS. I am a useless man.
So they've been ingraining this in our heads for a potential shutdown. And I mentioned this in my videos. When it comes to predictive programming, it's not just to condition you into believing it and believing whatever narrative they give you with it. It also serves as a purpose to program you in how to respond when these events go down. And that's really what the Purge movies are there for. The Purge movies have been put in place for a grid shutdown, how they want you to behave, especially and obviously that's marketed towards the youth out there. To run amok, to commit crimes, to realize that there's going to be no accountability held with a grid shutdown because nothing will be working and the police will not be arresting anybody. In fact, nobody would even be able to call 911. So how convenient. You got to love how the news anchors are like, oh boy, that's really strange, right? And how this built-in cyber attack narrative continues to get pushed onto us so that we'll believe that it actually happens. And of course, again, you've been programmed to believe that it's going to be this guy wearing an anonymous mask who has a hoodie on, who's sitting in some type of factory warehouse or his grandma's basement, who has the ability to attack the United States of America's power grid. They're conditioning us into believing it. And the stories that continue to come out are so fictional that it's becoming laughable at this point. It's becoming laughable that people actually think that when this stuff does actually occur, that it's going to be some type of an attack from Russia or China or some hacker. This, again, will be your government causing chaos because their motto is order out of chaos. And if they shut the grid down, you've been programmed already to believe it, to accept it, and to believe whatever narrative comes out of it because they've been subliminally programming us for a decade now for this grid shutdown. And of course, everything that occurs and comes out of this fake election in 2024 is preparing us for it because Trump in power or Biden in power, they've already given you every single narrative of a potential boogeyman threat who would be responsible for this. Not to mention the predictive programming of the film Civil War that conveniently has just been rolled out as this 911 outage has been reported. So law enforcement agencies across 4 states in America were left scrambling following reports of major 911 outages that saw millions unable to contact authorities late Wednesday and early into Thursday. Many of the outages reported in Nebraska, Nevada, South Dakota, and Texas were eventually restored. While officials haven't said precisely what caused the outages, they come on the heels of a Department of Homeland Security warning of heightened cyber attack risks on 911 services as they moved to internet-based systems. Well, not only that, you see, the more they condition you with the news so that you can expect this to occur, the more that you won't be suspicious of your government doing it to you. That's why back in January, the FBI director came out and warned that Chinese hackers were preparing to wreak havoc on the U.S. critical infrastructure. But the reality is, your government has already shown you that they hate the current way the infrastructure works, that they want a new one. Because all the globalists are working together and telling you this stuff out in the open at places like the World Economic Forum, at the Bilderberg meetings. They're telling you that there needs to be a new infrastructure, right? So then they tell you that China, for whatever reason, they have nothing better to do. So Chinese hackers are interested in wreaking havoc on our U.S. critical infrastructure, not your own government, who is telling you that they don't like the current structure because it doesn't give them enough control over their civilians. They want the type of control that China has over their civilians, where they can actually monitor their every step and actually figure out how many times in a day they've taken a leak and in whose toilets they're peeing in. That's what's going on in China, and that's the infrastructure that they're trying to bring to America. So China wouldn't be the one hacking the U.S. infrastructure and wreaking havoc. It would be your own government. But they keep telling you about this stuff because it's going to happen. And they want to make sure you know that when it happens, that it's who they're telling you is responsible for it. Instead of saying, hey, the FBI director is warning us that Chinese hackers are wreaking havoc, are preparing to wreak havoc on the U.S. critical infrastructure, shouldn't we all be going, okay, well, if you think that they're going to do this, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you stop it instead of telling us about it? Why are you telling us about it? Why don't you just go and stop it from occurring? Why don't you make sure our infrastructure is stronger, right? Because they don't want it to be stronger, just like the stuff with the border and the narratives that come out of that. It's all sabotage being done by design. Same with this. There will be a grid shutdown. I guarantee you. I don't know how long it'll be for, because I understand the narrative that they're going to want people back online because it gives them more control. The internet is their method of control, and their technology is their method of control over civilians. But they'll still be able to feed you narratives while the grid is down. They will still be able to feed you a narrative. Okay? This has happened before. It can happen again, where they don't need the internet. They don't need 800 different media outlets to report it. You'll get a one streamlined narrative that'll come in. So people start telling each other, oh, it's Russia, it's Russia, it's Russia. They'll still have control. And then when they bring the grid back on, of course, you will be subservient to them, and you will give them what they want, which is full compliance to be able to use the internet again and navigate. But remember, a lot of this stuff with the cyber attacks, with 911 being down, initially are to create chaos, but order comes out of that chaos, which includes resetting everything and going back to zero, including your bank accounts, including what you own. You'll own nothing. That's what all this stuff is about. So when you hear stories about the 911 outage, what you start telling yourself is, this is becoming too normal. We're hearing a story every single week about some type of a hack or something being down, right? Facebook, Instagram was down. Remember that a few weeks ago? Oh, Facebook's down. Instagram's down. People were losing their minds. AT&T was down. People were losing their minds. Telling you on the flip side that your own government's websites are capable of being hacked. The FBI telling you that there's a major attack coming. Telling you the grid is vulnerable. They're telling you this stuff ahead of time, not so that you go and buy food and prepare yourself, so that you're programmed into accepting that it's happened without thinking that your own government is responsible for doing it. I can't emphasize that enough to the people who still are out there listening to my channel. So this goes on to talk about, quote, we are aware of reports of 911 related outages, and we are currently investigating. It was less than 2 months ago that AT&T had their widespread outage that left thousands without service and impacted 911 as well, which the carrier said was likely caused by a process error, not a cyber attack. Local law enforcement agencies on Wednesday reported a full statewide outage in South Dakota. The South Dakota Department of Public Safety said Wednesday evening that texting to 911 is operating in most locations, but the phones are down. And I love, too, how all of this stuff is occurred in 2024 as we move towards this fake rigged election, that the buildup has all been for this election. Trump's first reign, Biden's reign, and now this election, all of those 8 years have been built up for the fictional outcome of this election. And as 2024, we rolled into the calendar year, they gave us Leave the World Behind right as we rolled in. And then you see all the programming in there. You see all the grid shutdown, cyber attack programming, what the world will look like without actual cell phone service, and how insane these people will go. And then we can look at about 90 other million movies that use the same predictive programming, right? The Purge films, preconditioning you for how to behave when this happens. World War Z, these zombie apocalypse like movies, where they're metaphorically speaking about a lot of these zombies that we're currently living with in this simulated reality that we're in. So when you hear that 911 is down, right, you should be suspicious about it in multiple states, right? This isn't 911's down in your small town where you could say, oh, maybe somebody hit a telephone pole, right? Maybe something happened in my small town where 911 is down. It's deliberately done, multiple states that are spread out. They're conditioning you and prepping you for a real run when they shut this down. They're watching how people are responding to this. They're reading every single tweet, every single thought that's being uploaded to the internet to see if anyone's suspicious of it other than the narrative they're giving you, because they get it that you're going to be suspicious of it, but they want to make sure that you're programmed enough to believe that it could be Russia or it could be China or it could be it could be ISIS, whatever boogeyman they decide. They want to make sure that's where your train of thought is. Because if the citizens in this country realize it's this small group of people who are unelected, pretending to be elected congressmen who continually just go and put on this show every single day, and people just continue to accept it, right? They're going to impeach Mayorkas. Oh, but the other side voted against it, right? Instead of going, hey, shouldn't everybody be on the same side when it comes to these issues? They're just gaslighting you into exhaustion. This is a tactic used in warfare. Gaslighting you into exhaustion and then making you and preparing you for the narrative they're going to give you when they decide to create the ultimate chaos, which will be a grid shutdown, which will be no 911, none of these things you've become accustomed to, no Uber Eats, no grocery store, all these things we've taken for granted. Watch how the world responds, because we ultimately know how they want this new infrastructure. And the only way they're going to get it is by nuking this one and nuking people's minds and their lives. And a grid shutdown will literally make people lose their minds. They will short circuit. Figuratively and literally, they will short circuit without technology, without the comforts. And the government knows this, and they know when they bring it back online that these people will be begging the government to give them electricity, to give them their groceries, to give them Uber Eats, to give them their phones, most importantly. And then the government will hold the power to say, now for you to come back online to prevent a future attack, you will need your digital identification to prevent any of this stuff. And this will make everybody comply to biometrical digital identities, which has everything to do with the mark of the beast. This stuff with the 911 calls, with AT&T down, it all ties together. None of it is by coincidence, and it's not just going to keep happening where it goes off and comes back. Eventually, one of these times, which I believe will be after the election, even though a lot of people think it's going to be before the election and they say there won't be an election, I think it will be after the election, because there's built-in narratives with Trump and Biden for World War III. And there's the built-in narrative of dividing conservatives into red states and liberal Democrats into blue states. And that all is going to play out based on how this fake election goes. So don't be suspicious that 911 was offline in multiple states. And if you are suspicious, which they expect you to be, just believe the narrative. That's the most important thing. Believe the narrative that they keep telling you. Believe it could be a Chinese hacking group or a Russian hacking group who apparently have nothing better to do than to hack into America's info. There's no motive for these people. Oh, I just don't like Americans. We want to hack into the whole grid. And then when you hear the government warn you, your response should be, then why aren't you doing something about it? You're supposed to be doing something about it. That's why you make the money you make. That's why you're in the positions you're in, is to stop these types of things, right? But they're telling you that it's sabotage. They tell you this every day. They tell you this with how they run in circles with Mayorkas, with Hunter Biden's laptop, with how the main concern of the United States military is that it's trans inclusive, that they know everyone's pronouns. They're telling you that this is gonna fail and fall flat on its face very soon. They even tell you that the United States of America's power grid is ready, vulnerable, and willing to be attacked. And I say willing because the government is doing nothing about it except telling you that the grid is going to go down without saying this is what we need to do. And the whole thing that's keeping this going is the citizens in this country buying into this show that the politicians are putting on and thinking that the Republican politicians are trying to change this. They're trying to do something about all the chaos. They're enhancing the chaos because the civilians are investing their emotions in the politicians, thinking they're trying to stop it when they're not. They're trying to run you in circles. And they're playing the roles so effectively that it's believable. The Republicans are making it believable because they're tickling your ears, saying everything you want to hear. That's what Trump's role is. That's what Ted Cruz's role is. That's what all the conservatives, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's what their roles are. Just like the Democrats are making it seem believable that the country's falling apart because Joe Biden is senile and old and Democrats are all just really dumb. They're doing it deliberately, and they're going to deliberately shut it all off very, very soon. And when you try to call 911, you aren't going to have 911. You aren't going to have food. You aren't going to have any of this stuff that you've relied on your whole life. So you better start learning trades. You better start learning how to survive because this isn't fear-mongering. This is me warning you. I've been warning for years. I warned pre the outbreak that occurred. I warned and warned about them trying to get this poison inside of people's bodies. I got shut down 80 plus times over it on this specific platform. And I'll continue to warn because it's not about fear mongering. It's about me telling you, don't believe the narratives when they come. Because when this happens, I'm not going to be sitting there going, I was right, because we're not going to be able to communicate with each other anymore. I want you to be prepared mentally to understand what's happening, not to get sucked into the narrative, to ultimately understand what they're trying to do. And then you could speak with other people when this goes down. And it's going to be nearly impossible. You're going to find that out when it goes down, when you go to your neighbor and you try to tell them, hey, the U.S. government, they're pre-programmed with this crap to believe Russia and all this other stuff. They're going to spew it at you before any fake news even comes in about who's responsible. They're already going to be, and then you're going to go, oh, wow, why are they saying this? How do they know? They've been pre-programmed. That's what this is. It's conditioning and programming. So I want everyone who listens, and again, I know it's not many people anymore, to be prepared. Prepare yourself, have food, prepare yourself in this event of an emergency, have emergency supplies, have any medications you might need, and mentally be prepared because the government is bringing about chaos. And that's how they plan on bringing about their order. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.